This week, the dangers of virtual personal assistants, infecting Windows 10, data exfiltration the hard way, native ad blocking, and more cars are hacked, fake Twitter accounts from the past. Most people don't update Flash. Jason Wood joins us for expert commentary on researchers using ride-sharing cars to sniff out secret spying tools. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Brought to you by IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand for a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account. Visit itpro.tv/hacknaked and use the code HN30. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Welcome to Hack Naked News for June 6, 2017. This is episode 128, and I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Couple of quick announcements before we dip into the news for this week. The first B-Sides in Uganda is called B-Sides Kampala. Is going to be held October 14th through the 15th. The CFP is open until July 15th, 2017. Topics of interest for that CFP include network security, web application security, innovative attack and defense strategies, malware analysis, biometrics, and evolutionary computing. Check out more at bsideskampala.com. Come check out Wild West Hack and Fest. It's put on by Red Team specialists from Black Hills Information Security and will be held on October 27th and 28th for hands-on hardware hacking and talks by famous infosecers like Dave Kennedy, Deviant, Egypt, Chris Nickers, and Chris Gates, Mike Poor, Sub T, and more. Check us out on the web at wildwesthackinfest.com, HACKINfest.com. In the news this week, major security issues surrounding virtual personal assistants through Siri, Google Now, and Cortana. On your smartphone, your conversations could be recorded. This article explains how this could happen and states the security risk with virtual personal assistants will grow even more complex as it gets further intertwined into the Internet of Things. A good read for everyone to serve as a reminder that privacy is, in fact, dead, or at least pretty well on the way there. All the time. WannaCry could be used to infect and exploit Windows 10. Researchers at RiskSense stripped the original leaked version of Eternal Blue down to its essential components and deemed parts of the data unnecessary for exploitation. They found they could bypass detection rules recommended by governments and antivirus vendors, says RiskSense senior researcher Sean Dillon. Eternal Blue gives instant uncredentialed remote access to Windows machines without the MS-17010 patch update. While it's difficult to port Eternal Blue to additional version of Windows, it's not impossible. Unpatched Windows 10 machines are at risk despite the fact that Microsoft's newest OS receives exploit mitigations that earlier versions do not. Yikes. Despite Microsoft's best efforts in this case, these researchers have proven that the exploit can now, of course, be used on Windows 10 systems. Not a huge deal and something that shouldn't surprise us, and we should have been anticipating this move and patch your systems. Routers are spilling secrets through their LEDs, according to the register.uk. So let's say you've hacked into a camera at a location, and it just so happens that the camera is pointed at the front of an IoT device with LED lights. You know, the ones that blink like crazy when they're passing traffic. So let's say you have access to said device and gain unauthorized access to it. If you have all that, researchers have shown that uploading a malicious script and or firmware can transmit data by blinking the LEDs on and off. This is, well, yeah, it's kind of way out there and far-fetched, to be honest with you. If an attacker already has access to your router, it's game over. In fact, if they have access to your internal network, your router's likely the weakest link anyhow, and they can get data out without really having to exploit this method, unless they want to be really stealthy. I don't see this in widespread use, of course, to say the least. However, I do see it perhaps in use by nation states that want to be super extra stealthy when exfiltrating data. 2 cheers for Google's native Chrome ad blocker. However, should we be cheering? This comes in 2 forms in a potential 2018 release of Google's Chrome web browser. The first is to allow Chrome to control ads that don't adhere to rules agreed upon by the Coalition for Better Ads. And these are the ones that come up automatically, that take over the whole page, that play videos automatically. And it's not blocking because it only stops the ads that transgress in very specific ways. As I was saying, autoplaying videos, prestitial ads with countdown timers, which block a home page for a given amount of time, and sticky ads, which persist even after scrolling. There's also a new feature called funding choices. Still in limited beta, there is a way to charge users who refuse to turn off their ad blocker. The revenue from this, stored in Google's digital wallet, will be split with the publisher, and you guessed it, Google. Not sure that's the best way to go with advertisements. However, it is an issue. There is some contention around this issue, as users often don't like the experience when browsing a website with too many ads. However, on the flip side, publishers rely on that ad revenue to make money. Vulnerabilities could unlock brand new Subarus. Interesting researcher by the name of Guzman focused on how their iOS and Android mobile apps from Subaru and the web app communicates with Subaru's Starlink servers. He found 8 vulnerabilities which, when used in various combinations, could allow him to add other users to a Starlink account. Those users would then be able to access the vehicle's usage history, including location, as well as unlock doors and honk the horn. Starlink, however, doesn't control kinetic functions such as braking or acceleration. Charlie Miller weighed in on this research and stated, unlike Facebook or Twitter, people don't communicate with the Subaru servers very often, and so it'd be a difficult attack to pull off. He says, compare this to the Jeep attack, where the only requirement was the car was on. It required no proximity or interaction by the victim. Good news, though, most of the flaws have been fixed, although Guzman continued to keep an eye on updates to these applications. A hacker mimicked thousands of real Twitter users in reference to research he did in 2012. Not sure how this one came into the headlines. However, this might be the first time he came public and said he didn't use Twitter's own API as he assumed it would be monitored for abuse. But turns out, if you use Twitter with a very old web browser like Internet Explorer 6, the site presented an easy-to-script for plain HTML version of the site. At the time, Twitter also required CAPTCHA, so Davey spent $10 on a CAPTCHA breaking service. He believes it would still work today, and Twitter's, of course, official statement is they try to crack down on this kind of stuff. I'm paraphrasing there. Right. Still be aware of fake Twitter accounts, though. They're often easy to spot by the provocative female images used as the person's photo. Outdated OSs and unpatched browsers expose companies to risk. No big news here. However, Duo Security's 2017 Trusted Access Report, released on June 5th, states that the report, which provides insight into the security status of 4.6 million devices that Duo Security helps manage, found that although Windows 7 has already been superseded by Windows 10, it remains the most widely deployed version of Microsoft's operating system. On the mobile side, the majority of Android users are not running devices with the latest patches. Go figure. Adobe Flash is also a problem, with 53% of endpoints analyzed by Duo Security running out of date and vulnerable versions. As we report on Flash vulnerabilities all the time, seems like at least once a month, we've got a new Flash exploit, or zero-day vulnerability and zero-day exploit perhaps running around in the wild. You'd think people would patch that stuff. Our expert commentary this week is coming to you from Jason Wood from Paladin Security, who will be telling us about researchers using ride-sharing cars to sniff out secret spying tools. But first, a word from our sponsors. You have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Welcome back, everyone. Couple of more news on the security conference front. And this just isn't AnyCon, except that it is AnyCon, the first hacker conference of its kind in Albany, New York, taking place on June 16th and 17th in the Albany Convention Center, a brand new venue. This will feature a Capture the Flag competition, hardware hacking village, and a ping pong tournament. Several tracks will be offered in a family-friendly environment where the keynote will be delivered by none other than Dave Kennedy. Security Weekly's own Doug White will be there recording Hacker Movie trivia and giving away Security Weekly t-shirts, Hacker Movie-themed glassware, and for special people, Security Weekly Challenge coins. Go to anycon.info/tickets to register today. Security Weekly listeners can use the code PAUL and get $25 off your ticket. ITPro.tv's courses now include Computer Hacking Forensic Investigator V9, Kali Linux, CompTIA A+ 901, and Accelerated CompTIA Security Plus. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. You'd pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year. But since you're either listening or watching this show today, for a limited time, you will get 30% off your monthly active subscription by visiting itpro.tv/hacknaked and using the discount code HN30. Here with us today is Jason Wood of Paladin Security to talk about ride-sharing stuff.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
Things and stuff. I am well. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing good.
I'm looking forward to hearing about things and stuff.
It was some pretty interesting stuff, to say the least. So listeners of the show may probably already familiar with the Stingray systems that are used by law enforcement to monitor for folks that they are trying to surveil or keep track of as they're investigating potential crimes or crimes that have been committed. The problem with the Stingray systems that most folks have is that they are a little bit controversial in the fact that they don't require search warrants for law enforcement to use. And law enforcement is maybe understandably a bit closed-lipped about what it is they're doing and how often they use it, the technology behind it, things like that. So some researchers from the University of Washington decided that they wanted to gather up a bit more information about this. Their concern is around the transparency of the use of these devices and how often they're being used. So they tried to figure out a way to come up with to detect the use of Stingray in a couple of different cities. And I thought this was rather clever in how they went about this. The equipment and technology really isn't that new or unusual, but what they did to distribute it, I thought, was pretty clever. Basically, they contacted some ride-sharing companies in the Seattle and Milwaukee areas and paid about $25 a week to load up some ride-sharing vehicles with about $500 in equipment. And they would be performing the distributed war driving, if you will, for the researchers. And what they did for this is let me take a look at the cases contained a GPS module, GSM modem, a Raspberry Pi, a cellular hotspot, an Android phone running Snoop Snitch. And with this setup, not only were they able to distribute the war driving itself, but they had it reporting back into their central system, some server somewhere that they were using, so they could start pulling all the statistics together as they came in. So I thought this was pretty snazzy myself. I had messed around with war driving using remote control vehicles and UAVs and stuff like that. And here these guys took it way out there with a much simpler and to be honest with you, by just putting a suitcase inside of the back of a ride-sharing car and let it do its thing.
Of course, though, it's difficult to differentiate between someone with an IMSI catcher and someone in the law enforcement running a Stingray. Correct? Am I correct?
Right. Yeah.
So
and they did say that.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was going to say they did say there are some limitations on the data that they collected and their coverage. They were looking for a couple of different things to try and determine whether or not this was a potential Stingray device. One of some of the anomalies they were looking for, things like cell towers that seem to magically change a location, appear or disappear, bounce around on different frequencies than a brighter range of frequencies rather than a normal cell tower would, and are sending out localized or weaker signals to try and limit how far these things reach. The difficulty, of course, with tracking this and knowing and confirming that this was a Stingray system versus anything else is they can only do this by observation. It's not like they're going to be able to contact law enforcement and say, "Hey, we think this was you, was it?"
Yeah,
and
it's not like there's a
response back.
And to my knowledge, there's no fingerprint of a Stingray system versus any other type of system. There very well may be, but determining what that fingerprint is going to be defined by how accessible that gear is, and if it's only for law enforcement, it's going to be hard to fingerprint. I guess is my point.
Exactly, and that is one of their comments from their research, as they said, we had these things out here running for quite a bit of time, but they only had 15 drivers between the two different cities, which still enabled them to capture something like 1,400 cell towers in Seattle and 700 in Milwaukee, and map where those were, but those cars had to be in the area that a Stingray device was actually running at the time.
Correct.
To get anything from it. And they don't leave these things up running for weeks at a time or something like this. So
and that's why it's
going to be difficult.
And that's why it was kind of unique and a good on their part to partner with the ride-sharing systems to get that level of coverage. It's interesting. They probably could have provided some non-security like who has the better coverage in what area statistics as well. I'm not sure if they still have that data, but that's of course a non-security usage for their efforts and research. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there are still some questions I have about this. I mean, one of the things that you're going to have, of course, as these devices are running around these ride-sharing systems, they're not going to be just picking up ride-sharing Stingray systems or cell towers. They're going to be, getting in contact with every mobile device that they come across. And they said they had millions of data points to go through. I'm really hoping they handled that data appropriately in its destruction. That is a little bit concerning, but nonetheless, our phones are broadcasting this stuff. All they did was get really kind of clever about distributing their monitoring, their scanning. I honestly, the report is interesting. They say that it needs a lot of work, but kudos to them, for being clever, and looking at it and saying, hey, how are we going to get this out here? Well, let's talk to these ride sharing companies. And for $25 a week per car, boom, they had this, distributed environment performing this. And, they're gathering up information that we wouldn't have had otherwise as to the use of these systems. Potentially, they could start to potentially fingerprint some things. One of the devices they found was actually near a law enforcement center in Seattle. And the behavior that it was exhibiting was very unusual for a cell tower. So, much higher probability there. And that's some interesting data to give some insight to how these things could potentially behave in. So I'd be interested to see what comes out of this, if any more research is done by these gentlemen and what they come up with. But kudos to them for some creativity here and putting this together and the work that they performed and doing the analysis. I think that it's a good thing to, I'm very pro police personally, but at the same time, I get a little bit cautious or wary about the idea of not having any insight into everything law enforcement is doing, at least on enough of a level that we can, feel that we don't have wholesale abuses of civil rights and things like that occurring. So good work, I think, on their part, and interesting to see how this develops if it goes any further.
Fantastic. Jason, thank you very much for appearing on this episode of Hack Naked News. Fascinating research. You can find links to all of the stories we talked about today in the show notes at wiki.securityweekly.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.